Okay. Okay, I guess we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Julie Bond. I'm the Executive Director of Good Samaritan Haven, and I welcome you all. I'm so glad you're here. We've been wanting to do this kind of an event for a while, and because the pace of the work is so relentless, it just has taken a little while to coalesce, and so we're thrilled to have this opportunity to talk with you, to connect this whole group here, as well as the folks that we were connecting with last night in Barrie. We wanted to just make lift up the fact that we're all in a network of making this all possible. You know, it's a mutual aid for the work that we're all doing because of how we lend ourselves to it, you know, from being a donor, being a volunteer, being a staff member, being a board member. It's all part of one thing. And so because I lament oftentimes that I don't have a lot of space in a very long day to say thank you and create gratitudes for all of you and all the work that you do to show up for us to make the work possible. This is our opportunity to do that. So I want to give a big thank you to you all ahead of time for being here, for being part of the work and being connected to it. And with me here is Meredith Warner, Deputy Director of Good Samaritan Haven, and Luke Rackers, Director of Administration at Good Sam. And we'll lead you tonight in this discussion. We'll take a deep dive into the work that's happening historically, currently, what's happening in the community, as well as where we're going. And I did want to share, to set the stage a little bit, sometimes when I have a moment to process all that happens in a day and a week, I do some writing, and wanted to share a poem for us tonight. And the themes around it are, you know, a lot of these poems that I've been writing are about like what we are experiencing in the shelter, or what I see or observe, or just kind of the hard things that we come up against. And this is about space, or taking up space, and so those kinds of themes. And it's called Two Totes. They say I can only have 2 totes to store my things at the shelter. How can 2 totes carry all that I am? I may be neat as a pin or messy as a sandstorm. 2 totes will contain neither way of being. How can 2 totes contain all that I have come from? This anchor I need to stay grounded to this earth will not fit in this 2x4 space. The memories alone take up dozens of storage units across space and time. How can 2 totes contain all that I hope for in the future? Where can my complexity be stored? I'll try to stuff away my grief in this corner. I'll fold my dreams and lay them flat on top. I'm gathering items for my future apartment. These steak knives and utensils are for my new kitchen someday. Yet the knives must be locked up for safety. The yoke around my neck will not fit in this plastic box at night. I'll just keep wearing it so it doesn't count towards my 2 totes. Belongings, trash, treasure. This picture frame is broken, but the photo within the glass is of me and my beloved, who is no longer with me. Lost are my albums, my birth certificates, my IDs. Begin again from nothing, but don't accumulate. How can I take up space without taking up space?
So as Julie mentioned, we're gonna take you through where we've been, so a little bit of a retrospective of the organization, where we are now, the current landscape, what's ahead, so our vision and the new projects we have coming forward right now, and really laying out our philosophy of care. So what really anchors us to what we do. So we're approaching our 40th year, which is really exciting. That's a birthday for us, an anniversary. Planning for Good Samaritan Haven started in 1983. From 83 to 85, there was a formation of a board of directors and a special ministry of local churches in partnership with area businesses, and the state came together. Finally, in 1985, we purchased our building you see here on the left. This is 105 North Seminary Street in Barry City, in the north end of the city. And there was some delay in opening because of some permitting and zoning delays, as you can imagine. That never happens around here. And the shelter finally opened its doors on June 23rd, 1986, and we had a single guest that first night. Since then, we've grown from a single shelter to much more of a continuum of care. We offer a place for folks to stabilize, to connect to healthcare, recovery services, and community. And that growth has really not been optional. It's been part of just meeting the need in the community, right? We're responding to what needs to occur to help to keep as many people sheltered as possible. Before the pandemic, before 2020, we had a single year-round shelter that you see in the upper left. Again, that's Seminary Street. It's a 17-bed semi-congregate shelter. In 2020, during COVID, the state really shifted folks into motels for public health reasons, and our support was located mostly in the Hilltop and the Econo Lodge, and this really marked a transformation of when we started to see that exponential growth. In 2020 and 2021, we purchased the Berlin Welcome Center, which was formerly Twin City Motel. Rick DeAngelis is here with us tonight, and he was really pivotal in that project. And while we were doing that, and then following that, Barry City opened back up as COVID changed the landscape, and we were able to open that space back up again. And we also, during that time, started our street outreach team, which is just working with folks who are living unsheltered in the community. In 2021, we opened our South Barry recovery-oriented shelter, which is 13 beds. And I'll let Julie talk for a minute just about that program, because it's very different than our other shelters in the network.
Yeah, the recovery-oriented shelter is a dual identity shelter or program, in that it's primarily a shelter first, and has an additional layer of programmatic process to it that allows folks who are dedicated to their recovery and sobriety to be in a dedicated environment. And so it's one of the first and only hybrid shelters in the state, and the only recovery-oriented shelter in the state. So it has a certified recovery house identity as well as a shelter. So you have to meet the definitions of homelessness to be part of this. The beauty of the model is that individuals don't need to pay rent as they would in a traditional recovery house. And so it allows folks to come in and kind of settle and unfold and focus on other things related to recovery and wellness, and then move towards one's goals in employment and housing and so on. So it gives just that much more space for people to be healthy and well and meet their goals. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then in 2022, the renovations to the Berlin Welcome Center were complete, and that opened. It's 31 beds. The rooms are mostly doubles, a few singles, so unlike our other shelters, which are semi-congregate, it's a little bit more private, and it's very accessible, so it really meets a lot of the needs of the folks in the community from an accessibility standpoint. In 2023 and through 2025, we expanded and continued to offer winter overflow in Montpelier. We also piloted a warming and day space alongside Christ Church and the community lunch program last winter. And And at that point, we also went on to receive our full certification for the recovery-oriented shelter, which I'd say too, we've had a lot of interest from other providers around the state who are looking at our model for recovery-oriented shelter and thinking about really expanding in their areas as well, which has been exciting. And then finally, in 2025, just a few weeks ago, we purchased Turret House, which is on Berry Street here in Montpelier. It'll be our first full year-round, full-time shelter in Montpelier. 18 beds, very similar programmatically to our Berry City shelter, and we're really excited about it. We actually will start renovations on Monday. And so we're hoping that'll be open soon, and excited to welcome folks in. I'm going to pass this mic over to Luke.
Thank you. So since 2020, we've seen a steady increase in the number of guests served at our shelters. And alongside the demand for emergency beds, we've been confronted with a shift in the needs and circumstances of the individuals we serve. So on the chart on the left, you can see in 1986, 20 people served annually. To 2024, we had 368 guests we served in 2024. And you can kind of see that steady growth in guests served happening as we're expanding our shelter network. On the right side shows a little bit more about our complexity of need, as it's really common for our guests to have co-occurring issues from chronic illness, substance use, trauma, disability, etc. We also have a large portion of our guest population over 55. This number at the bottom shows that, our guests over 55, which represents about a third of our guests at the Welcome Center location. So we are serving some of the most complex guests, and this is one of the reasons we've built out this network to meet people's needs across this complexity of care. And unsheltered homelessness continues to be on the rise in our area. For the first time in our community's history, there are more than twice as many people living outside as there are emergency shelter beds. Our street outreach team supports over 220 people living unsheltered, compared to just 94 shelter beds across our entire county. And the 220 has recently been updated to closer to 250, and even that we know is an undercount. Our current staffing model in the shelter is one staff in our 24/7 schedule to 2 shelter guests. For our outreach team, there's one staff for every 55 people living outdoors right now. Our street outreach team is just 4 staff. We have 2 part-time staff and 2 full-time staff currently. And they're serving 2 to 3 times as many people as our shelters combined. So because of that complexity of the need that we're seeing, that you're seeing on our slides, Good Sam has been building out these programs in order to address needs as quickly as we can. We talked a little bit about our street outreach team and our recovery-oriented shelter. We have a food program we continue to run at our sites to help meet people's nutritional needs. Our hotel motel program recently sunsetted this last year, but our staff continues to help people get into the motels as needed and maintain their vouchers. And I'll let Meredith talk a little bit about our wellness and recovery programs.
Yeah, so a few years ago, we were fortunate enough to receive a grant from the Department of Substance Use, and that's allowed us to really integrate wellness programming into our shelter environments. That can include things like painting, meditation, and we have a pretty robust walking and hiking program. This is something that while it's focused on folks that are in recovery or in active substance use, it's really open to anybody in the shelter just to support any ways in which we can help habits around just regulating your nervous system, how to calm down, and how to get through that experience and build skills around just living life. And that's one of the spaces I think we're really excited about bringing community in and offering community to come in and work with our guests and help our guests. We've had interest in fishing. We recently had a pumpkin carving night, which was really exciting, and that was in combination with working with some other community partners. We had donations from Community Harvest of the pumpkins and built a whole night around it. And we have a shelter coordinator who's really excited about a movie night program. And so it's really just opportunities to feel like you're part of something, show up, relax, and be in it.
And Julie, could you say a little bit about our peer-based employment model?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we also have the joy of working with a vast spectrum of people with lived experience, folks who have veteran status, who have their own lived mental health experiences, recovery experience, you name it. There's just such a breadth of experience that folks are bringing as, say, shelter coordinators in the shelters themselves, our administration. We're just all in one community, and so I think that's what makes it a rich environment for everybody to dwell. It's something that we like to support and try to support as best we can, and we've worked for quite a few years now to try to elevate the field of shelter provision, homelessness services, because it's such a difficult field to work in, just emotionally intense. We want to try to support the staff to make this a field that they can feel proud and supported in, to make it a career if they so choose, to have the same types of benefits that any organization would try to be able to offer as an employer. And so that's a real commitment of ours. It has been for quite a long time. And so building it from its time of a volunteer organization and growing it over time has been something that we've added all of the things that come with a growing organization, you know, health insurance and paid time off and all the things that might be taken for granted in other organizations, but it really was important to make it real and make it so. So that's happening all the time and growing all the time.
Probably doesn't come as a surprise to anybody in this room that we're in a challenging, chaotic funding landscape. We're entering this year with lots of uncertainty. We had $1.6 million that has gone unfunded in our latest state grant that would have supported a lot of those programmatic efforts you've seen on previous slides, our street outreach team, case management, additional case management for hotels, and an overflow model that we proposed to the state as well. The state's really just shifting right towards supporting bricks and mortar shelter, which we appreciate. It's standing up our new shelter, but it doesn't fund that crucial street outreach need that we've lost funding from in this last year. And this is, all of the things that we're offering in that programming to support both our guests and the unsheltered population really speak to how we're living out our philosophy of care. So we're continuing to try to do that through our funding too, and looking at other avenues to meet that need. And of course, the federal dollars that are coming through have additional strings attached, which we are also being very careful about these days, as they don't always match the philosophy of our organization. I think this is one of the most interesting slides for me tonight, showing the under-resourced nature of homelessness funding in rural Vermont. The left side chart shows homelessness rates in Washington County that are nearly double the rates per capita in Chittenden County. The right side of the chart shows that we receive about 30% of funding per person in Washington County as they receive in Chittenden County. We know rural areas face higher costs per guest, longer travel, fewer services, etc. Yet the funding formulas continue to reward urban visibility and not rural need. This is certainly something we continue to lift up as something to advocate for and change, and we hope you join us in that effort too.
Julie, can you change the slide? Sure. That's okay. All right, so the way we are looking at it now is really that we're experiencing both a housing crisis and a crisis of unsheltered homelessness. We have seen the motel program shrink dramatically, which has acted as a stopgap for many years now, part of that safety net, and it's really reduced. We see that the housing and rental market is just very much out of reach for so many people, and continues to seem to go up and up. I'm sure we all notice that. And then that really keeps folks locked into poverty cycles. Right now, we know that we have more than 220 folks outdoors, and when we talk about that from our team's perspective, that's Barrie, Berlin, Montpelier, but it's also a lot of the outlying rural towns and villages. We tend to folks in Plainfield, Marshfield, Calais, East Montpelier, Waterbury, sometimes as far south as into Orange and south of the Barrie area. So a little bit into the Mad River Valley as well. And what we do know also is that we have, in terms of emergency shelter beds, not for Good Samaritan, but in the Barrie district, there are 94, and those are generally at capacity, with the exception of, when someone leaves a bed, you might have a night or two of gap, but other than that, they are full all the time. At last count, we had 113 adults in the motel program in the Barrie district and 25 children, and that was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, the last time I checked. And so that brings us to around 452 individuals experiencing homelessness in central Vermont, and likely undercounted just because we know there are folks that are just not on our radar at all. The other crisis that we face is the climate crisis. So we all went through this together. We know that we lost a lot of dwelling units in the region, and I think at first we didn't feel that impact, but it's definitely as the GA motel program and folks who were in the motel program based on their housing status post-flood have continued, people have continued to just fall out the bottom of that system. During the flood of 23, 2 of our shelters were impacted. Staff and guests were evacuated amid the waters. In the following weeks, like all of you, we faced the weight of that crisis management, the cleanup, the recovery. And that experience has really shaped how we're thinking about emergency preparedness and resilience within the organization. In the image to the right, you can see our transit van floating in the water, and we were just super fortunate to have donors swoop in after that experience and replace that van really rapidly for us. So we felt really supported through that time, for sure. So our Berry City shelter sits about 6 feet from Gunners Brook, and that's North Seminary that I showed the image of earlier. And when it floods, the streets to either side of it become basically a raging river, impassable. So it becomes almost an island on its own. And our Welcome Center, which you see on the left-hand side here, lies along the Stevens Branch, so it's in the floodplain as well. And while the buildings have been fine throughout, most of the damage has been to the grounds. The major problem with this location for us from a flooding standpoint is that it blocks emergency access. So we can't get an ambulance or a fire truck in and out when that happens. And so that's our primary barrier with that site. Based on that, and this is the layout of our Seminary Street. You can see the building of the center, Gunners Brook. You can see how close it is on the right, and it's hemmed in by the accessibility ramp on the left-hand side, which is cement, which is right there. So we did a process with our staff and with our board, and we've just made a bold commitment to, whenever possible, move the folks that we serve out of the floodplain. We feel that it protects the folks that we serve, the public resources, and the community investment in our shelters, which is a partnership with our state, and in that way it's a partnership with all of you. And we see this as an act of justice. We feel it's really important that we should not ask the people who have the least resources to live in the most vulnerable locations. So what's in the future? It's our 40th year. We want to really enter into that with a lot of clarity and a lot of purpose. We want to engage really proactively and not reactively, listening deeply to our guests, to our staff, to our partners, to all of you as a community, to think about our pace as an organization, to be really intentional in that pace, and to be really mission-driven in that work. And in that way, we want to really be strategic at what we choose to do to move forward.
So I'll take us now into some of the projects that are in development, various stages of development in the organization, in order to respond to that commitment and to respond to the need in the community that we just outlined. So as we noted earlier, the Turret House is the first full-time year-round shelter in Montpelier. That will be opening in March of this coming year. We just signed the construction contract, so next week we will start our renovations in the interior of the building. The site is very similar to the Berry City shelter. Some folks might have volunteered in the Berry City shelter in the past. This is a very similar footprint in many ways. It will be semi-congregate bunk-style building with 18 beds. And one of the key elements to it is that it is not in the floodplain. And so it is on Berry Street, about halfway down the road, still very accessible to services in the community, walkable. And we thought that that was really important for all the guests to be engaged in the community in that way. And as Meredith started to talk about the Berry City shelter, which is our flagship shelter, it's been there 40 years, or we've used it as such for 40 years, had some challenges in terms of its, we had intended to do some major renovations of it just prior to the 2023 floods. And because of the changes in the flood hazard mitigation rules, it precluded us from doing major renovation unless we were to lift the building up. Many folks are facing that requirement these days. So we took a deep dive into kind of assessing the processes, lifting, tearing down, rebuilding on pylons, you name it, relocating to a different site. So we chose the plan that we're committing to as an organization in terms of not being in flood plains or zones or ways, floodways. And so we are moving the shelter out of that location at some point. What we have done now is we have submitted an application to the state, to the Community Development Block Grant for disaster relief funds, to hopefully relocate the building to another site somewhere in the city of Barre, not in the floodplain. And so we hope to know in about a month's time if that might be funded, and so that we could go forward with that initiative. The future of the site would be to demolish the building and create a pocket park with also some more floodway restoration to help protect and prevent additional flooding in the area, and see how we can work with the city to kind of help that intersection that gets really intensely impacted, and still try to be cemented in the North Barre neighborhood, as that's a legacy neighborhood for us, and really try to build sustainability into that work. And so for a year and a half or 2 years, we've been working on some pre-development work and feasibility to see if the bit of property that is to the right of our Welcome Center, it's a field kind of on the corner before you go up Hospital Hill, could be used as another site to expand capacity, shelter capacity. And so that was deemed feasible, and we've done some zoning and various architectural design work to specifically create a complex care shelter at this location. And that would be a shelter that tends to the really complex medical, mental health, and sometimes developmental needs of our guest population. Sometimes individuals who are not sick enough to be in the hospital but don't have a place to discharge to. There's a real struggle in the community, and the burden on emergency rooms and hospitals to find locations for folks to recuperate safely is what has been looked at for a long time to have as this solution. And so this is generally shovel ready once we have funding for it. And so we're looking forward to that possibility, that solution in the community. Until we do that, however, we're engaging in a programmatic pilot, sort of a small-scale version of a complex care initiative. We are partnering with a lot of organizations in the community to lend their various expertise, their clinical expertise, so home health and hospice, Washington County Mental Health, the hospital, Down Street Housing, and Speranza Inn. We're People's Health and Wellness Clinic. We're doing a whole collaborative to see if we can identify both a temporary site to have a number of beds for recuperative care, and engage as a team to see how we can make that all logistically possible in the meantime until this more permanent site is built. And as it notes here, we'll engage in a capital campaign at some point to make that possible. So I did note this pilot project for complex care, but we're trying to do a lot of different innovative solutions, creative solutions, pilot projects in order to bridge the gap in where we're seeing the need in the community. And so complex care is definitely one area of that. One area also, which is kind of the broad umbrella of that, is a concept of Healthy Haven, which is an integrated health and recovery support system more clinically based, because we're finding that our most vulnerable neighbors and those we serve in the shelters have some of the most complex health, mental health, substance and recovery, and developmental needs. And we are sort of the least, infused with that. We're not a clinical facility or facilities, and we don't have that kind of resource at the moment. And so our vision is to have that, make that possible for people so that they can be met where they are, where they need to be. And likewise, a lot of what we're trying to do is bring people in from the street who have historically not been able to access our shelters, maybe due to some of the thresholds that we have for substance use and so on. And so we've tried to build out an alcohol harm reduction process and program to help folks to manage and reduce their alcohol intake, not to stop it if that's not their goal, but to make it so that they can meet the thresholds of being in the shelters at night so that they can be indoors. We're just trying to get folks indoors, get them indoors. And again, another thing that we're doing, because a lot of our staff, as I said, bring their own lived experience to the workplace, we want to infuse our culture, our work culture, as a recovery-oriented workplace. And so that is something that we're always doing, is trying to support everybody wherever they're at in their own recovery and mental health, wellness and physical health, you name it. So those are a lot of the things that we're up to programmatically. A lot of what I just said is harkens to those who have really created the street medicine culture of the last number of decades, to bring the care to the people where they're at, where they are, not expecting individuals who are ultra vulnerable, don't have transportation, are highly compromised in whatever physical or mental health crisis way that might be going on, not expecting them to follow multiple referrals or to get to appointments that might be out of reach in terms of access location-wise and things like that. So we're really trying to create a model where the care comes to them. And so that's our focal point. And so we are trying to create the partnerships in the community that will then come to the bricks and mortar shelters over time. So really that's what we've been hearing in the community over time and seeing and experiencing, is that there's really that kind of need. And so all of that boils down to how a philosophy of care has evolved over time. Most definitely as the organization has precipitously grown over particularly the COVID era, the last 5 or 6 years. In the shelters, we expect to provide boundary and expectation and accountability, yet we want to do that with compassion and with a non-judgmental presence always, always meeting people where they are in their own journey. We're trying to be as restorative as possible. It's not our goal to exit somebody from shelter to homelessness. That's not something we want. And so trying to be as creative as possible to keep people in the shelters is what we aim for. A lot of that is through restorative processes, mediation, things like that. And again, that's trying to build resilience over time for people, anchoring us all together, trying to avoid cycles of trauma, and trying to just really instill healing instead. And so, as I noted before, we're all an incredible network, an incredible web, doing so many different things to help and make this work possible, both through this organization as well as through the community at large. So we're often asked, how can you help? There's so many ways. And so, of course, donations are certainly an appreciated way. It's a way with unrestricted funds to make quick response possible, emergency response. Keeps us really, really nimble and able to answer the need as we can, as we hear it in real time. We just created, with the help of students at UVM, a platform. They created a platform called Gift Drive, which you can go online and see the drive that we have, the donation, I don't know, what do you call it? Donation drive. Yeah, donation drive. But it allows us to be really intentional and pinpoint the types of things that, for example, our street outreach team really, really needs, exact items that they're seeing a need for all the time. So it's been a real helpful way to donate and create that response. Becoming a monthly donor is a wonderful way to support the organization. Regular donation across time is really helpful for any organization, any nonprofit, so that they have that awareness in terms of their annual fundraising and accounting, just to know that there's that continual support. There's lots of volunteer opportunities. Through the COVID era, our volunteer program shrunk to zero, as just happened all over the place, and over time has been slowly rebuilding. As Meredith said, our wellness program is burgeoning. So if anybody has talents and interests that they'd like to share, that's certainly helpful. The material donation organizing is another element of need that we have when we get donations from throughout the community, to be able to organize that and know what's there and then be able to send it out logically in an organized fashion is really helpful. And then, our food program, especially as we're bringing in on a fourth shelter, will certainly need daily volunteers to choose days that they would be willing to make meals and bring them to the shelter. That's sort of group-wide or individual families that do that for us and have for many years, and it's really very welcome. We would love additional meal providers over time. So there's some ideas. And I thank you all. Here's a little end cap of a very colorful quilt that we will have as a raffle item for our annual appeal, this end of year appeal that will be starting in a few days. My mom had initiated a quilt drive a couple of years ago, and this was one of the ones we have. We gave out many quilts to guests to keep them warm, keep the brightness abounding during winter. So it's a lasting legacy. So we wanted to share that that's still happening, because many of you have heard of that over the last couple of years. So thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks. We really welcome questions and conversation. We'd love to just know your curiosities and kind of have a give and take now. But again, this was really our opportunity to take a deep dive, share this with you, and then truly share our gratitude, our thanks for all that you do, all that you provide in the many, many ways that you do to show up for this work and for our community. So thanks a lot. And I'd love to open it up to questions if anybody has reactions or thoughts. Or Gabrielle.
So on the slide with the urban-rural divide or difference, is when you talk about the per capita funding, you're just saying the total funding as it breaks down per capita, or are you actually saying there's a per capita rate that differs?
What we did is we took the state's own data about how many individuals per capita are homeless, and then we looked at the full amount of funding that's made available to the district, and calculated that ourselves. So I don't think there's an intention. But that's how the numbers actually shake out. I think that urban homelessness is so visible and it's so much part of the national conversation. And we often, even we call our outreach team street outreach, right? But most of the time our street outreach team is in the woods, right? So for us, it's really about starting to think about how to name rural homelessness and bring more attention to the very unique conditions that folks are experiencing homelessness in a rural place are coping with, because they're dramatically different from urban locations. Yeah.
I was going to ask about your street outreach, and you talked a little bit about your pilot and how that interacts, but can you say a little bit more about street outreach and what are the goals and how you gauge success and what the challenges are?
Actually, I just, in anticipation of a similar question, I've been working with our team recently because we've been working really hard we've just designed a lot of mechanisms to try to bring people who historically have not entered our shelters into shelter. That's really important to us this year. In particular, it's just a focus. So I've been working with our team to try and make sense of some of those numbers with a specific focus actually on Montpelier. So of 69 individuals that we've worked with in Montpelier who have historically been unsheltered here, since July, our numbers since July are that 16% of those folks have achieved stable housing, 12% have entered the Good Samaritan Haven shelters, 12% have entered GA, motel, that's the motel program. 4 people are incarcerated in the justice system in some manner. 1 is in a mental health program, 1% in a youth shelter, 3% are doubled up or couch serving, 1% in a car, and we have a remaining 25% outdoors. So the street outreach team, their primary, and it's interesting because the staff themselves each have a unique way that they engage with folks, right? So we have one person who's a peer outreach, and that's very relational, right? That's about like sitting with folks, talking with folks, being present with folks. And they all do that, but one who that is really their focus. We have another person who's really just an expert at being in the woods, helping getting folks set up with tents, knows exactly the materials they need, and is there for that physical support. Also provides a lot of the peer support as well. And then we have one person who has a mental health and substance use counseling background, and her focus is very much on talking with people about how to reduce harm to themselves based on the substances they're using, connecting them with all those kinds of services. And then another person who's really focused on mental health care support with individuals, and 2 of them are really doing crisis intervention. So we're trying to build a program that has a lot of different paths for support. And then, of course, a lot of it's just like basics: food, water, boots, jackets, tents, all of those things. So it's a pretty broad range. Did I miss anything?
Like basic first aid and wellness types of things. Wound care is something that is done as well. But yeah, no, I think you covered a lot of it. And
we've been really excited in the last year. We've connected with at least 2 medical providers who are just so excited to join the team in some manner. And so that's another, we're looking for opportunities to be able to bring them on, and we've been talking with People's Health and Wellness about that as well. So we just feel like that go to the people piece is really important. So we feel like for us a component of street outreach that we'd love to add beyond basic first aid and wound care would be a little bit more clinical presence. Yeah.
And the street outreach program is underfunded and partly unfunded at the moment. And so as Luke noted, the ratio that's wildly out of whack. We're trying to fix that and both make our team whole and be able to cover their costs through this year, but also build it out so that that ratio is not 1 to 55, and it's, you know, it gets more realistic over time. So that's a real key focal point for us in the next coming months. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions? That.
I just have a question about at the different locations. Is there a time limit for how long people can stay there?
Well, it's typically a 90-day program, many shelters. This one in particular, however, that's kind of truncated by the fact that we're in a major housing crisis, and so there's not, you know, the kind of pipeline of housing and opportunity doesn't really exist, so that no matter if somebody has all their applications and funding sources and different things in place, it really is often a waiting game. And so individuals can be engaged in all of those goals, and it could be a way longer wait than that, you know. It could be twice that, it could be 3-4 times that. The average shelter stay around the state was in the 120-day several years ago, and right now it's over 400 days, 420 I think. So that's, you just see the trickle effect of the housing crisis and just not having the number of opportunities out there. Yeah, so, yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what my question is, but I think the obstacles and the challenges that we're up against and meeting you as well, I'm very impressed with all the things that you're doing with a pretty stark reduction in resources. And when you look, there was an article in Vermont Digger today with the Vermont Housing Authority talking about the crisis that's coming with the
Yes.
lack of, you know, the cut on the Section 8 housing and all that, and
yes.
how many people are waiting for housing compared to like a year or two ago.
Yes.
I'm just wondering what you think our leverage points are with getting the state to recognize that this is an issue. And when I was so surprised to see the per capita resources that we have compared to Chittenden County, because that's what's in the news all the time, or the discussions between the state and the mayor in Burlington about resources needed there. So what can we do to leverage those kinds of state resources, which we really need, and if we're going to stand up some kind of overnight shelter that we need for this winter, what can be done?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, continued advocacy for sure, you know, raising our voice about it and just the huge need. I'm continually testifying in the legislature about the need. I think, you know, there's a lot of unused properties, you know, and trying to appeal to just all of our community property owners. Are there locations that could be used? The real tricks are the need for sprinkling and fire suppression and fire safety and stuff, and that creates a bit of a barrier to some of the properties that are being looked at, and so the ability to move fast and to move in a nimble way when it comes to that has been the challenge. But I think just still pressing on that and trying different creative ways to solve this is what we need to do. We started implementing another pilot, many pilot projects and initiatives. And one of them is a scattered site parking program to try to figure out if there's anybody who has a driveway, a parking lot, a piece of property anywhere in this region that would be willing to host a person who is camping in their car. Not many, just one, so that it's scattered. It's not an encampment scenario. That's what we're hoping to do to kind of solve some of the temporary nature of people having to move constantly in cars. It's not a great thing for the winter, but it's one way that we were thinking of a need to be able to anchor down for families so that they can be in school systems with their young people, because they keep having to move, and that doesn't allow for being in a school system. So there's like all these different creative ways that we're trying to tend to it, and not one entity can solve it all, right? And that's why we all need to come together and figure out different ways that would resonate with each of us, you know, because even, as I say, if somebody has a driveway, like all these things could help one person or one family. So it's little by little that we have to tend to this right now. So yeah, it's a hard process that we're involved in. It's really, and it creates a lot of moral injury, I think, for a lot of folks in this work, experiencing the issue themselves, those who are saying, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer. I mean, that's a very, very difficult message to have to deliver to anyone. So it's not easy, but that's why we're trying to get creative with how we are responding to the situation. So, yeah.
A couple of years ago, I think there was a newspaper article that you all were in conversations about buying the Econo lot or whatever it is, where the building on the way to Northfield. I don't know whatever happened with that. Was it for sale, or I don't know what happened?
It wasn't formally for sale, but we always were inquiring. I think Rick and I did so many inquiries of the different properties around. You know, there's various reasons that some of these properties wouldn't make sense for Good Samaritan at the time, just like sheer size is one thing, or revamping something of that size, like the cost of it and things like that, and the speed at which one could do that. So taking on more modest projects has tended to be what we've done since then, I think. Yeah, it's tricky because we're not formally a developer, and yet we want to be that just to solve the problems. And so we end up kind of having these multiple roles and identities and skill sets that we assume and learn on the fly or as need happens. But that one just didn't pan out for some sort of logical reasons, and yeah.
Is the health club totally off the table? You used that last winter, didn't you?
We did last winter. I think that the city had other ideas and uses for it, and I don't actually know if those have come to pass. Some of it was childcare use. Some was, you know, like using more of it for some bigger uses. So we weren't, you know, a logical entity to stay there. The other thing is that it was a pretty tricky logistical place to run a shelter, because we had to transport everybody every night back and forth in the evening and then in the morning because of its isolated location. And so that created just an extra layer of complexity for our running the shelter. So that's why we've been endlessly looking for more permanent shelter in town, and we're excited to find the location on Berry Street for that reason. Yeah. Jeremy?
First, thanks for just an excellent presentation. It was really great to see all the work laid out, and especially to see the like laser focus of the organization on your mission and what you're trying to build. Just one quick accolade before a question. Julie, I really appreciate your poem that you opened with.
Thank
Mine
you.
was an excellent poem, but I was imagining, like, what if other leaders of organizations in our world took the time to reflect in poetry and share that with us? Like, it's just awesome that you did that.
Thank you. Thank you.
My question and interest is in the kind of complex care that your shelter guests need, and the project that you have around a complex care shelter is really interesting. But in the absence of that, I'm wanting to hear more about what you're seeing in terms of providing healthcare to folks with really complex needs. You talked a little bit about potential of pilot. Just like, what's the landscape look like for folks who are trying to get their healthcare needs met in the shelters, but also outside?
Yeah, the access to care is one of the biggest barriers. So transportation is super hard because most folks, not a lot of people have cars, or the bus system is takes time, and it's a little complex. So that's one of the pieces. It's just trying to get to places. We end up hearing a lot of like non-engagement with these services because of not being able to reach them. That's one of the primary things that we're tending to and trying to respond to. Trying to connect people who have really intense mental health experiences that we have in our shelters, I think, is another piece of it. If somebody chooses to be unmedicated, or they don't have access to medication, or don't have the economic resources, those kinds of things, those are other barriers that we're finding, and so we're trying to help support them in whatever way we can. But again, we're not a clinical place, so trying to like bring in as many clinicians as we can only is possible if the funding exists, and so that can be spotty, and so we're trying to make it a little bit more of a smooth process. You know, People's Health and Wellness Clinic is an incredible partner of ours, and so we rely heavily on them, and they're just straight out with their work volume, right? But they do, and the state of Vermont also helps us to do like vaccine clinics, and we'll do things like that on site. So we'll do all of these sort of targeted activities and events that are clinical in nature as we're able. So that's sort of how it's shaping up. But it really, you know, we find ourselves responding to kind of medical or mental health crises in a way that we wish we had more on-site ability to respond clinically. Yeah, it's just not there. Yeah.
I'll just add too, we've developed a really nice relationship with the Central Vermont Prevention Coalition. And that's building, and with Thrive Network, and that's just building more capacity and relationship between us and the UVM Medical Network. We also have a really nice relationship with a provider from Gifford, which has been really lovely. So we're trying really to just cultivate relationships with the individual providers who really want to work with the folks that we serve. We find when the people we serve are being, you know, seen by a provider who maybe doesn't understand the economic conditions that they're facing, or doesn't understand some of the experiences they're having, that relationship can be really tricky. And I think we would love to work closer with Thrive, especially probably to really support providers in Central Vermont to be more, to understand better how to work with people who are experiencing homelessness, how to meet their unique needs, what kind of questions to ask, right? If somebody's not showing up to an appointment, instead of, you know, sending the bill along, being curious about why they didn't arrive that day. Because we do honestly have reports of folks saying, like, I had a bad experience with a provider because of my substance use or because of my economic conditions. And that's not so much about blame as it is about, we need to do a better job of educating medical providers and that full system to work with the folks that we serve. And that's another really kind of important, something we'd like to achieve, and we're building support around.
I have two questions. The first is, well, it sounds like your process around consideration of climate resilience has been really thoughtful and a really great model. I'm wondering if you have are there any plans for the Welcome Center in particular in terms of building more climate resilience at that site?
Great question. Some of it involves having alternate egress. Up, more north on the property, so that emergency vehicles can get in and out, because that's the big stumbling block to when that road floods, because that's the first thing to flood, and so you lose access. And so if we can get an access road or entrance right up there, it might solve or prevent us from having to evacuate all the time. So that's the hope there. It's very unlikely we'd be able to get a road access up onto the state highway. It's kind of or federal highway. It's just very complex to make that request. So this was our plan, our goal. Yeah, but otherwise it's up, and we can also evacuate up to the top level of that property. So we've been in conversation about that being the option if at least the emergency services can get in and out. Yeah, yeah.
And then so my second question, I appreciated the slide that showed the just complexity of needs and sort of overlapping needs that are present. And I wondered if there are any other trends around demographics that you've seen over the years, whether that's race, gender, language,
Question. You're
Yeah, I
a
mean,
data
age is
guru.
the obvious one.
Age.
Yeah, I mean,
for
we
sure.
serve people over the age of 55. And for somebody who's been unsheltered for any length of time, if they're over the age of 50, they're going to present at an age, physical health, that's, over their actual numerical age. That's been the primary one. I can share, because this is my soapbox the last few weeks, as we've been doing our alcohol harm reduction program, we have come to realize that a barrier for us is that the state has very few female rehab beds. And, when somebody comes to you and they say, now's the time, you go, that is the time. And we're finding that we can support men to go through a detox experience and then find their way directly into a rehab bed. But with women, that is not what's happening for us. And we've recently been able to connect that to the loss of 2 individuals this year, 2 women. And so that's what we're talking about. At every meeting I'm at, I'm saying that. And that's a gender-based difference that we really do see. And I have not dug in yet to those why that is. I mean, I think historically with alcohol there was a much bigger difference between substance use or how it was managed by individuals by gender, and that's been on the rise. But I do know, particularly CVMC is they have lifted alcohol as a priority space for them based on their community needs assessment. So we're really hoping now that our local hospital it's really on their radar, that we can just keep lifting this up and keep working with partners to expand that. But I think Good Samaritan's MO is when we see a gap, we just try to build it ourselves, because you got to just do the work. And so that's I would say that those are 2 of the biggest differences that we often see.
Yep.
Youth, we've had a lot more youth actually. If you talk about up to 25, 26, where Elevate accepts people into, and Elevate Youth has grown, they're a great partner. But definitely, I think we've seen more youth homelessness in the last few years as well.
Agreed. Yeah.
Other questions? Before we go, I want to share, please have some more to eat and stay and chat. And also on the back table, we have some flyers for our gift drive, for volunteering. Those all have QR codes. If you're interested to get more information on those, take them with you. We also have an FAQ sheet for the new Montpelier shelter. So if you're curious about how that shelter is going to run, what's going to happen there, when it's going to open, all those things, it's on there. And we'll be beginning that community outreach process really localized on Berry Street very soon, but in the more broader community. So please stick around and chat. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.